journey beyond imposter syndrome. This is where I invite you into a space where high achievers and spiritual leaders converge to redefine success and self-worth. By sharing transformative stories and engaging with thought leaders, this podcast serves as a roadmap for navigating the complexities of imposter syndrome. It's an intimate look into overcoming personal barriers tailored for those who value wisdom, leadership, and intuition in business and life. Join me at the Humble Warrior Podcast with Alani Bankhead. Hello, Humble Warriors. It's me. And we're here to talk about anger today. So anger is often a tool that we think we're not really allowed to express, or we only use it sparingly. But anger can actually be a really powerful tool to get incredible results. And I'm actually going to share a little bit of a secret with you. But back in the day when I was younger and new in my military career, I earned a call sign. And that call sign was APR, which was short for Angry Puerto Rican. And this was an endearing term that the flying unit that I was in had given me because I was just this feisty, energetic, young person running around, what I now call a member of the Get Shit Done, the GSD task force, right? And when I think about myself back then, I was so feisty and angry. And not in terms of lashing out at people, but in terms of using energy and being able to harness energy to motivate people to do things that needed to get done. And so at the time, that anger was so unchecked that sometimes it got me into trouble, right? Sometimes I ended up running my mouth and not being so polished. And that caused some trouble with different folks in the unit who understandably weren't open to receiving the type of feedback that I had to offer. So I've got more than 2 decades under my belt of being able to learn how to harness anger to work for me. And actually, I think in a lot of ways, anger is one of the most misunderstood emotions. And I want to talk to you guys today about how you can use anger to work for you. If you're on the opposite end of the spectrum and you feel like, yeah, I could totally resonate with having an angry adjective attached to my name, and you want to let go of that tool, we are definitely going to talk about that today as well. And so most people know me as Lonnie, right? I smile a lot. I'm really nice. But one thing I've discovered over the course of my career is that I do actually have this alter ego. So much like Beyonce has Sasha Fierce, right? So Beyonce is known to be an introvert, which is crazy because she's one of the biggest pop stars in the world. But she talks about this character that they named Sasha Fierce that kind of takes over her body when it's time to go on stage. And the Sasha Fierce character is the character that is able to perform in a way that is so captivating for people who are at these events. And I have a character like that as well. I actually fondly call her Deedee. And Deedee is this little badass warrior on the inside. So she's this internal projection I have of myself. And when I work human trafficking or child exploitation operations, or I'm doing anything that has to do with protecting or saving life, at some point, Deedee takes over my body. And it's really funny to observe it because typically I do experience a lot of imposter syndrome, much like you guys, right? I feel like I'm looking at my deficiencies and the reasons why I'm not good enough for the work. But when I allow Deedee to take over, I just flip into this mode of it's not just get shit done, but it's the fun and the joy of seeking justice and knowing that I'm absolutely going to crush it. And so I actually remember the first time I really experienced Deedee, and this was back on my first deployment. So I was a brand new human intelligence, counterintelligence operative. So I was looking for terrorism operatives that were looking to kill people. And it just so happened that one of the informants that I was running was an Al-Qaeda member who made car bombs. And I remember learning about this person. I got their dossier and I'm reading through all this historical reporting on them. And I discovered that they'd actually been responsible for the deaths of several service members from the United States, as well as innocent Iraqis, right? They were collateral damage. And I just remember the anger that I felt of knowing that I was going to come face to face with an individual who killed life. And I had to formulate my strategy going in to build a relationship with somebody who literally was my mortal enemy. And so I actually, as part of my motivation, I kept pictures of the service members that had been killed in these vehicle-borne IED attacks, so the car bombs. In the dossier, I kept them by my computer so I could see them every single day and remember that even though I'm building a relationship with this person, they're not my friend, right? And not only they're not my friend because I'm trying to stay alive and not get killed by a potential double agent, but this person did things and there had to be consequences for those things. So in this moment, I remember experiencing this thought, and this is going to sound so selfish when I say it, but I'm just being honest with you guys. But I really felt like I'm going to make this person believe that I am their best friend. I'm going to ingratiate and build a relationship with them to a point where they're going to trust me completely. And I'm going to use them. I'm going to suck them dry of intelligence. And when they have no other intelligence left to give me, I'm throwing his ass in jail. Like I was that mad about it. And so I would show up to meeting after meeting with my smile on and I'd build a relationship with this person. But deep in my heart, I could feel Deedee was just like, the justice is coming, motherfucker. We're going to use you and we're going to save lives. And then you're going to be held accountable for what you did. And so that was the first time I really experienced Deedee. And when I talk about it, it's strange because it is like there are these two sides of me. Like I am a super nice person, but again, when it comes to my ultimate life purpose, which is protecting life, I'm going to do what I need to do to get the job done, to make sure that people don't die, to make sure that people aren't abused, to make sure that abuse stops if it happens, to prevent abuse, right? And I'm sharing this story to illustrate the point that in that season with that particular informant, anger was actually the primary tool that I used to get the mission done. And in theory, we did save lives. He gave us a lot of intelligence that led to the killer capture of a lot of other really bad guys. And you never actually know the impact that you have, but I would like to think that we did help some people. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about examining the mindset that you have around when is the appropriate time to bring anger out, when is it time to tuck it away, because we've actually never really had conversations, whether it's with our parents or guardians or the people who raised us or even our friends, about the right way to use anger. In general, the messages society gives us is that anger is bad. We're not allowed to express it. Especially if you're a woman, you're definitely not allowed to express anger. And there are additional layers that could impact our ability to use anger as a tool, including religion, right? So there are a lot of religious practices that teach you that anger is something that is not righteous. It's not a virtue, that you should stifle that as much as possible. And so as a result, we oftentimes make excuses, we rationalize, we stuff anger down, right? We make polite, and right, wrong, or indifferent, it does take a toll on us, right? And when I get a lot of clients that, first of all, of course, like my clients are people of service who want to create big changes in the world. They're very, very humble. But one of the things that they show up with is this idea that I've done everything in my power to create the life of justice and elevation for humanity that I think needs to be created, and I feel powerless to create that change. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret, which is that oftentimes what I need to do with them as we look at their energy leadership index, so it's like a Myers-Briggs or an Enneagram or a DISC assessment, right? It measures leadership ability through emotions. That emotional output through the data, I can see where they've been suppressing their anger. And so even though they're service-oriented people, oftentimes I have to trigger their anger so that we can give that anger time and space to be fully expressed so they can discharge that from their body. And that will naturally catapult them up to joy, peace, and that thriving that they really want. And it can be really hard to undo this mental operating system because, again, society is always telling us that when you are of service, you definitely aren't expressing anger, right? Your job is to serve the person in front of you, give them whatever they need, even if it's at great personal expense to yourself. And so we know with imposter phenomenon that there are a lot of behaviors, but burnout, frustration, resentment are three key things that come out of that. And so if you're experiencing that today, what that usually means is there's some anger burning deep down that you've not given voice to that is starting to fester and it's starting to create problems. Okay. And so I'm going to oversimplify for the sake of conversation, but last time we talked about victim emotion, right? And the core thought around that was I never win. And so when you're tired of feeling like a victim, you're going to take control of the situation. And control is a subset of anger. And so the core thought here is actually I win, you lose. So no matter what, I'm going to do what I need to do to win. And this is a natural mechanism our body uses to get out of victim mode. So when you're done boo-hooing and feeling sorry about yourself, you flip a switch and you go into, I don't care what it takes. I'm not going to be a victim anymore. I'm going to make this happen. So again, there are no good or bad emotions, only advantages and disadvantages. Advantages of anger emotion. In my case, as a justice seeker, right, this is where justice lives. Justice is very black and white. You either win the case or you lose the case. You either have proven the elements of the offense or you haven't. Either a crime was committed or it wasn't. So in that case, anger can be very useful because it helps us define good, bad, wrong, et cetera, et cetera. And next level, anger actually helps us save lives, right? So, a very simple way I use to illustrate how anger can help save lives is children might be running around a house and they might go to touch a hot stove. So, you're actually going to yell at the child so that they don't touch the stove, so they don't hurt themselves. So, again, you're harnessing anger for good. This is not a bad thing. In fact, it's a life-saving measure, but it's something that you do sparingly to bring attention to an issue that is going to cause harm, right? Anger can also be used in like military scenarios or great other examples, like taking the hill, right? So the officer will come in and tell the Marines, you take that hill. And the Marines are going to do whatever it takes to take that hill. They're going to win. The enemy is going to lose. We all need people on our teams and in our organizations that are going to take the hill. We all know that person, right? They're the ones that no matter what, they get it done. They put mission above everything else, including relationships. And they're going to wreck relationships if that's what it needs in order to get the mission done. These people, even though they might be a little bit abrasive, are actually invaluable to ensuring the success of the work that you're doing, right? Now, the thing with anger emotion is that it's really appropriate only for short sprints, right? So again, if there's a dangerous situation, you want to harness the anger to create awareness and attention so that the harm does not happen. When we go back to prehistoric days, anger was an emotion that we utilized to get away from a saber-toothed tiger or fight the saber-toothed tiger to save our lives, right? So you get that adrenaline dump that causes you to decide it's either me or him, and I'm going to win. And so another advantage is actually that you can get a lot done by yourself using anger and control emotions. You can motivate a lot of other people to do things, right? So I remember there was one time as a young leader, and still to this day, I really like explaining the why to people. I want people to feel connected to the mission. I want them to understand the importance that every step that we take, there's a purpose and reason and intention behind it. But sometimes you don't have that luxury, right? Especially in the military or in law enforcement life-saving situations like I've been in. Sometimes you just have to like be told and execute. And I remember there was one time we were in the middle of an inspection, and which is not life or death literally, but existentially. And I remember we had the inspectors and they were asking for some stuff, and it was a very intense time. And I asked one of the NCOs for something, and they looked at me and they were like, why? And I swear my head spun. three times. And I looked at them and I was like, hey, listen, I normally take time to explain the why because it's important for you to feel connected to the mission. But right now is not the time. I just need you to do it and move on to the next task. So in that way, I was using anger because frankly, I was pissed that they were asking me why, right? I'm the boss. I don't need you to ask why. I need you to execute. And so that's an example of an advantage of using anger to get quick results and to motivate others in short time periods. People who use a lot of anger actually are very good at also playing the game as it was taught to them. So you might have noticed that in a lot of corporate or government or different office situations, there's a certain game to be played to get promoted. And so people who are good at harnessing anger oftentimes will identify what the game is to become successful, and they're going to decide it's a binary game. I'm going to win, you're going to lose. And they're going to make sure that you lose, right? And so they're very, very good at playing the game. They're very, very good at getting promoted and making things work out for them. Now, on the disadvantage side, we all know the micromanager, right? There's one in just about every office. It's just nonstop. They're telling you what to do. They're getting in your business. And people are motivated to take action from a place of anger and fear. And that can get a lot of results, right? But the disadvantage is that those results are actually not sustainable in the long term. You also can't inspire people from a place of anger and fear. So you might get short-term actions, but over time, it's actually going to atrophy and erode the team cohesion. It also erodes trust in teams over time, right? So people will not be productive after a while, they'll quit, or even worse, they will give up and not quit, which is awful for your bottom line. And additionally, there are disadvantages from a physical sense, right? So it actually will destroy your body over time. And now I'm not a doctor, but I've done enough research and I've seen enough of this happen in my own life and in other people's life that we're going to talk about the physical reaction in the body for a second. So when you become angry, your body actually goes through a process where it's releasing hormones. And rather than dropping endorphins or like the joy type of emotions, it's actually sending signals and chemicals to heighten your senses so you can confront whatever threat it is that you're facing. So whether it's a threat of a coworker who might get their promotion over you, whether it's a saber-toothed tiger, whether it's a child who's going to touch a hot stove, your brain dumps a bunch of chemicals. And so generally speaking, those chemicals that set your internal alarms ringing are epinephrine, which is also known as adrenaline, and norepinephrine. And so this is going to cause some physical manifestations. You're going to have an elevated breathing rate, elevated heart rate. There's going to be increased blood flow to your brain, heart, and skeletal muscles. Your blood pressure is going up, pupil dilation. You're going to start sweating, right? So again, you encounter a bear in the woods, your brain is going to be flagging the event as dangerous. So your body is going to dump the norepinephrine and epinephrine, so the adrenaline chemicals, through your spinal cord out to the rest of your body. And you're going to use that chemical to get every muscle and organ and tissue engaged in saving yourself. So they're like the whistleblowers of the body. And this is of critical importance, again, when it comes to using anger to do good. And so one of the other things I want to talk about in terms of layers of anger and whether you use them or not use them is, again, that religious element. And so you guys know spirituality is a very big part of my life, and it's a big part of the work I do, including this podcast. And I believe you have a responsibility to identify how your spirituality interacts with the rest of the world, because that's what we're going to rely on when we're in these very stressful situations. So this is a little bit of a lab space for you to be able to experiment with what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And so one of the things that comes up in a religious or spiritual context is, especially women, I'm not saying men don't get this. I know men get this a lot too, but men generally feel more comfortable expressing anger than women do. But women generally feel like they're not allowed to express anger, right? Women are not allowed to go against men in any way, shape, or form. They're not allowed to disagree with men. We're talking about very extreme kind of elements of religious behavior, right? If we're talking about a spiritual leader like a pastor or preacher or something like that, You're not allowed to challenge that authority, right? So challenging someone is a form of anger, right? You're saying, I think I'm right and I think you're wrong, and I'm going to challenge you. It doesn't matter how nice you say it. The intent is an I win, you lose situation. And so this wiring can be very deeply embedded, very deeply rooted, and it might take quite a bit of work for you to undo it. So the first thing is examining, do you believe that anger is a good or bad emotion? And most people would probably say that there is an inherent belief here that yes, anger is not a good emotion. And what instances have you seen where anger has been beneficial? So using a religious context, I am a follower of the Bible. Of course, you can follow whatever spiritual practice resonates with you. But when I was doing my research in developing my own spiritual work, I had to identify that in the Bible, God gets angry, right? God gets angry at injustice. God gets angry when you worship other gods. God's a jealous God, right? God's no, I built you, right? Like some idol, some little statue didn't build you. I built you. Like I want to have a relationship and a connection with you. And there are tons of examples in the Bible of where God took judgment on populations that were doing inappropriate, immoral type of things, right? And Jesus, in my practice, is the ultimate example of what a perfect human looked like. And I remember when I was first doing this research, I was very surprised when I realized that there are two examples in the Bible where Jesus showed anger. And it was when people turned the church, the physical church, into like a market. And so the idea of using God's house and defiling it to sell things and make money was not the original purpose of the physical church. And so Jesus got mad. He started flipping tables over. And so I love sharing this example because oftentimes most people don't really realize that, right? If you're a practitioner of Christianity. And so the idea that like God expressed all of his emotions so that we would have models of the healthy ways when we can show ours as well. And we have a responsibility to ourselves and the people around us to learn how to use those emotions intentionally rather than being at the mercy of them. That's what this whole series is about. It's about talking through each of the seven major types of emotions and understanding how you can harness it, when to put it away, et cetera, et cetera. And so when a lot of people discover this in terms of through the lens of Christianity, including myself, I was very shocked to be like, oh my gosh, yeah, Jesus was angry. And so Jesus was angry. I'm allowed to be angry too. And thus started my journey to discovering the best and not the greatest ways for me to use anger. So I remember one time I was new on this path and I was running a big operation. There were probably about 75 law enforcement officers, intelligence analysts, administrative staff, and we were doing a child protection operation. And there was this person in my office who was very draining. Everything was very much I win, you lose in their book. And this was not a team player kind of person. And I had been maintaining the peace. Like I would try to find the most professional way to respond to them when they were doing inappropriate things. Also, it's my teammate, right? So I have some wiring in me that says, you don't want to turn your teammate in for anything. Who wants to be that guy in general? But I realized that over time, it was really causing a lot of anxiety and breaking my body down. There are lots of symptoms, in addition to the ones that I expressed earlier, that can manifest in the long term, right? So if you are experiencing anger and fear and this type of anxiety and control long term, you're going to have breakdown in the tissues and fibers and nerves in your body because your brain is constantly dumping these adrenaline chemicals into your system. And long term, that's not the intent. And so I've had clients show up that were losing their hair, that had issues with medical stuff that was mysterious, that the doctors couldn't quite explain what was going on. And again, I'm not a doctor, but the more we dug into this work, we realized that there's that really famous book, The Body Keeps Score. The body was storing this anger in different parts of their bodies, and that was creating a lot of discomfort and pain in their lives. And so as soon as we were able to shift the mindset, right, in a lot of their cases, a lot of the pain started going away. Their body started naturally healing, right? So I think those are really powerful indicators that the human body is going to tell you when something is off, right? So your brain, your intuition are going to be the first things that are telling you, hey, you should do this, you should not do this. Oftentimes, we divorce our thoughts from the rest of our body, especially in Western society. It's all about intellect, and we less so emphasize the intuition. So we will naturally create division between our intellect and that empathetic, intuitive part of ourselves. And so part of why I'm explaining this is because this process helps you reconnect those two parts of yourself so you can start operating in full alignment with who you were actually made to be, right? And the anger in this particular case, going back to my operation, I finished the operation. It was successful, but we always debrief. So we get everybody together. We talk about what went well, what didn't go well, what we're going to do differently next time. And I remember this coworker, it was their very first operation with us. And so they had never worked the type of cases that we had worked. It was their first op. And I think the average humble warrior would think in that situation, maybe you be an observer for most of it. We want input. The input is very, very important. And input can come from anywhere, and we want it. But generally speaking, unless you have something that is so glaringly obvious, at least in my mind, I like to sit and learn and observe and hear what other people have to say. And this person gave a suggestion that made no sense whatsoever. And I tried to very calmly explain, based on what the law says and how the Constitution operates, we do it because of reasons A, B, and C. And they continued to disagree with me, right? And so at this year, I've got years and years and years of running these operations. I've been very successful. And it's not about me being right for the sake of being right, but I was trying to educate them on, hey, traditionally, like, this is how the law operates and this is why we're successful with these things. And they had a different way of doing it. And so I finally defaulted to, hey, yeah, you know what? I totally understand where you're coming from. If you want to operate that way for your operations, you are more than welcome to do. But as we continue to do operations, and if I continue to be the leader of these operations, then we're going to do it this way because not only is it ethically and morally right, but it holds up in court. We've gotten a lot of really good feedback. We've gotten a lot of really great justice. And so I basically did the buck stops here. So we've talked about it enough. I've tried to be open to what you have to say. I've given you all the logical and legal reasons why that's no good. And now I'm going to use anger to stop the conversation, right? I'm not physically getting angry, but I'm saying conversation's over. And so that's a way of harnessing anger. We finished that portion of the conversation. And then at one point, another person on the site wants to have a side conversation. So I go outside with this person and we're talking, and it's a difficult conversation, but one that I'm super open to having with this person. And I know it's going to be productive. Lo and behold, this coworker that I mentioned earlier shows up and decides to inject themselves into the conversation. So I consciously, because I've now learned how to use anger as a tool, consciously decide that I'm going to experiment and try getting angry to a certain point. And I turned to this person and I really unleashed verbally. I basically was like, this is not your conversation. You need to stay out of it. You are still new to this mission. You have a lot to learn, and it's better that you keep your mouth shut and just keep your ears and heart open and learn as much as you can, right? Contribute where you can, but you do not have the wisdom or understanding of what we do to start dictating how we do things. And it felt very uncomfortable in my body. I did not like it. I'm not used to expressing anger in that way. I knew it was the right thing to do because, again, the ultimate purpose of that was we wanted to make sure that we were teaching good methods that were aligned with the justice system and the Constitution. And this person was proposing something different. I was actually very proud of myself for expressing myself in that way. What I didn't expect to happen was someone in the supervisory chain came after me. the next week. So they were very angry with me. They berated me in front of everybody. They said it was my fault, right? Now, wrong or indifferent, what I realized was that there are good and bad consequences to all decisions, right? So in this instance, I opted to experiment with anger and expressing it towards that individual. And the consequence to that was my boss was not happy with me and I got an earful and I sat there and I took it. And I left. I was angry all over again. I felt very misjudged. I felt like my perspective was being ignored. I felt like they were taking this other person's side because they liked them better. I was making all kinds of interpretations, and that was really hurtful. And that triggered a whole other series of decisions. Am I going to stay at this place of employment? Am I going to leave? What am I going to do? Am I going to keep the peace? Am I going to ask for forgiveness and apologize and all these things, right? So there's a lot of different options. And the whole purpose, again, of this series is for you to create awareness around how you're operating and decide, is this operation mode serving me or is it not serving me? And what am I going to do moving forward to create the solutions that I want in a way that's aligned with who I'm actually meant to be? And so, am I really glad that I did that? Honestly, yeah. Even though the outcome wasn't necessarily something that was enjoyable for me or that benefited me, I think it was the right thing to do. But I had to pivot from that because honestly, like expressing anger in that way really isn't who I am as an individual. I can have a difficult conversation without raising my voice. I can think through how to frame certain difficult portions of the conversation in a way that I think it would be optimally received by that person in a way that is aligned with who they are and how they receive information. I also am a fan of couching everything I say in a hard conversation by honoring and acknowledging the gifts that that person brings, right? So I remember when I was a very young officer, and I still do this, but I always tell people, like, I'm like, hey, there's no winning and losing to me. It's all winning or learning. And I expect you to mess up. If you mess up, we'll have a conversation and just do better, right? We don't want to repeat the same mistakes. In fact, we want to share our mistakes with folks so that they can learn from our mistakes. But if at any point you do anything illegal, immoral, unethical, anything like that, or if we've had the conversation so many times that you're not learning the lesson and you're refusing to learn the lesson, right? So they're using anger to not learn the lesson, then I'm going to start writing paperwork. There's not going to be any further conversation. There's just going to be paperwork until there's a different behavior or until you get kicked out of the military, one of the two. Thankfully, it really only ever came down to maybe one piece of counseling paperwork for someone to change their behavior, right? But in that way, I'm harnessing anger and control as a tool to create a different behavior in somebody. So, for you guys to wrap things up today, what would it look like for you to give your anger space to be heard? And so I've talked about the two chairs technique in the past. This is a really great one if you're open to using it, right? If you're open and willing to explore your anger, it will feel very uncomfortable, but the concept is very simple. Imagine you have two chairs facing each other. You're in one chair and your anger is in another chair. And you ask it something like, what is it that you're mad about that you really need me to receive? And let it talk. Let it talk until it's done talking. And I think you're going to discover that there are a lot of things, a lot of grievances buried in your heart that need to come to light that you need to address in order for you, again, to catapult back up to that thriving and joy that you normally operate in. And so I have to do this every once in a while. Anytime I feel resentment in my body, I know that I'm busting a boundary of mine, right? Boundaries actually are a great form of harnessing anger. You're saying, here's the line. Do not cross the line, otherwise there are consequences. And again, that's something that if you're a person who's of service, you feel very uncomfortable setting and enforcing boundaries. But boundaries are some of the most powerful tools that a humble warrior can use in order to achieve their mission and live their best life, because it gives people guardrails on how to treat us and how we want to treat ourselves. And if you need any additional help in understanding what your anger looks like, giving it permission to express itself, how to process those thoughts and those emotions, and whatever your anger expresses in a healthy way to help you grow, guys, shoot me an email, Alani at mightysparrowcoaching.com. or DM me anger and we'll start a conversation. But I hope that this was a productive and helpful conversation with you guys and helping you understand that anger is not always bad. It can be very advantageous, it can be very disadvantageous. And my hope is that you give yourself the permission and that you exhibit the courage to go down this path and identify what is the best use of anger and how can I harness it to achieve my life purpose. So, guys, if you want any additional resources, go to my website, mightysparrowcoaching.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. I would love to connect with you guys. But in the meantime, humble warriors, please remember the world needs who you were meant to be. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey to discover how to harness your inner imposter to work for you. Love you guys. If you enjoyed this episode and would like some help overcoming your imposter syndrome, check out the free life purpose exercise on my website and subscribe to my blog. If you already know what your life purpose is and are ready to crush or harness your imposter syndrome, then you're going to love my best-selling book, The Least of Us: How Your Weakness Points to Your Greatest Power, available on Amazon and all major book retailers. Or you can hit me up at alani@mightysparrowcoaching.com to discuss private coaching or corporate and government training. That's ALANI@mightysparrowcoaching.com. Listen, there's only ever been one you, and there will only ever be one you. And you have a specific gift to give that the world desperately needs. Don't let your self-doubt be the thing preventing you from living your most joyful and impactful life. Until next time, I'm always cheering you on.